Blood Tribe, Chapter 1, The Vanishing. Dan, a 26-year-old software engineer, stared at the email on his screen. It was an invitation, or rather a mandatory notice, for a 2-day team-building trek deep into the ancient forest. The thought of sleeping in a tent and battling mosquitoes filled him with a dread far greater than any coding bug. He sighed, knowing there was no escaping it. The morning of the trek arrived, crisp and surprisingly bright. Dan, dressed in clothes he hoped were appropriate, joined his colleagues at the forest edge. Among them was Alara, her bright smile, a stark contrast to Dan's reluctant grimace. The forest swallowed them whole, its ancient trees whispering secrets Dan couldn't understand. As dusk painted the sky in hues of purple and orange, a strange restlessness settled over Dan. He needed a moment away from the forest camaraderie, a quiet space to himself. Without a word, he drifted from the flickering campfire light deeper into the encroaching shadows of the woods, following an unseen impulse. The path, if it ever was one, vanished. The trees grew denser, their branches intertwining like skeletal fingers. Dan stumbled, disoriented by the deepening gloom and the rustling sounds that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Exhaustion, or something more sinister, finally claimed him, and he collapsed into the cold, damp earth. A dull ache in his head was the first thing Dan registered. He opened his eyes to a world of woven bamboo. He was in a cage, sturdy and unyielding, its bars thick and tightly bound. Panic clawed at his throat as he pushed himself up, the reality of his confinement slowly sinking in. "Don't bother," a voice rasped from an adjacent cage. Dan spun around, his heart pounding. In a similar bamboo enclosure, a man with weary eyes and matted hair, who introduced himself as Kale, watched him with a grim understanding. "They don't let anyone out once you're in." Kale sighed, a sound heavy with resignation. "You've been taken by the Blood Tribe," he explained, his voice low and gravelly. "They live hidden deep in these woods, only come out to harvest new participants for their games." He gestured vaguely into the unseen forest beyond their cages. "Games?" Dan whispered, his voice barely audible. Kale gave a bitter laugh. "They call it a blood sport, a ritual to honor their ancient gods, they say. But it's just a fight to the death." His eyes, though tired, held a flicker of grim knowledge. 12 matches, Kale continued, his voice flat. 12 death matches, and you, my friend, are now one of the chosen. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Dan felt a cold dread spread through him, colder than the forest floor he had collapsed on. A distant, rhythmic chanting began, growing steadily louder. It was a deep, guttural sound that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath them. The air grew thick with anticipation, and Dan knew, with a horrifying certainty, that the ritual was about to begin.